Typically, when we elevate our objects out of plan and up into the perspective, we always start with our back objects, just like what we did with the isometric drawing. But I'm going to show you how to do this cube first and then the pyramid, and it's going to get a little bit more complicated as I go through the rest of these. But the reason we start with the back first is it has information that'll eventually be cluttered. And if we start first with these guys, we'll never have all of the evidence that we need to bring them up later in elevation. You'll see that later on when you start to do more of these perspectives. So I'm going to elevate the cube first. And just like the isometric, we rely on that grid. And I'm going to just at random, just throw up some lines, some vertical lines from each of those corners. I don't know how high to go until I refer back to my measuring wall. So right now, I've just brought up points directly above these points in cube or in plan. So how high is 2? Well, as I mentioned before, I cannot measure. Don't ever do this. Because if I did, you could see that that's how high it would be. Well, we know that that's not a cube. We need to go back. We need to follow the line back to the measuring wall. So how we follow that back is go right back, connect up to the vanishing point, and where it hit on that ground line, here's my ground line, which I will actually emphasize. This is my ground line right here. And just to reiterate, what I did was I connected back to my vanishing point at this point here, and I drew a line back to the measuring wall. At this point, what I can do is make a vertical line, and when it hits 2, at that point right there, I now extend that back into the perspective. So there's my height from my vanishing point, take it through that point. Aha! It's now meeting up with those lines I made vertical. So those are the lines that I can darken. That represents the height of my cube in perspective. And honestly, once you've measured once, you don't have to measure again because that's 2 all the way across. So there is the height of my cube. How do I find the height on this back portion of that cube? Really simple. Keep an eye on that vertical line there. Put your pencil on that corner, go back to your vanishing point, and vanish towards that vertical line and stop. You don't have to go any further. And these 2 will line up, and these 2 will line up here. Not so much in that case. I probably had a little bit of movement. There we go. That's much better. There we go. So now all of these are lining up. So that's how you find the height of your objects. It's really, really simple and exactly the same as when you're doing it in isometric. As for the pyramid, like the isometric, we knew that the pyramid base was here, so it is not leaving the ground. But what is high is the apex of that pyramid. So putting my pencil on this point in here, I'm going to extend it vertically, very lightly. I don't know how high that pyramid is going to be until I go back to the measuring wall from the point that represents that apex there. So that's one thing to keep track of always. Every now and then, a little bit of confusion can result. But nonetheless, I'm going to follow this line back to the ground line using my vanishing point there. I get back to the ground wall right here. Where it stops at ground 0, I can extend that vertically as well. And now the height that I'm looking for the pyramid, I said it was going to be 7 units high. So on this line here, this is 2, this is 4, this is 6. Now if you wanted, you could use your scale to find out where 7 is. I got my 0 on ground 0, the 0 line there, and there is 7. Or if you're lazy like me, you could have just drawn an X through there and found out that that was 7. So that's 7 in actual height. And what I'm going to do is draw a line through there until it gets to that point right here, which represents the height of the pyramid. So doing just that, Don't need to draw that line until I get to here, and there is 7 units high in perspective directly above the center point of that pyramid. So once I have that, this gets easy. I just draft the facets of that face of that pyramid all the way down to the base, to the corner point. And I'm not going to draw right through here because it won't see it, but look at that. I will see one little edge of that pyramid there. I'm going to connect the front face as well. And because this is in perspective, I will also see this last corner going up. And eventually tone will be important to distinguish. There we go, nice big beautiful pyramid. And I could have been a lot more careful on my drafting, I can see right now for sure. And then just to reiterate, this is a line drawing, so I'm going to just create a bit more tone through there. So a lot of complication when you're drawing these perspectives, and that's why it's nice to have a tracing paper overlay, because it does get pretty confusing. So shall we draw, let's draw this octagon. Let's just commit to that now, because if we draw the cylinder first, it's taller, it will be really difficult to see the information back there. So what we did down below, I'll just recapture what we did below because it's going to help us draft what's above. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a box within which what this prism sits in, and we'll recast all of these pieces right there. And I see I've made a mistake. I'm just looking at this right now. These points don't connect there. They do actually connect. See what I did? They're supposed to connect right there at the tip of that circle, which is not, this is where that diagonal line got confusing. This is the point right here where that octagon will connect. It will also connect right here. So don't get that confused. And I owe you another one. I owe you another explanation there so you don't see my mistakes. But we really do want it to connect at these points, not the guidelines that I used to create that ellipse. So this point here, here, and here are key, as well as those outer points right there. So I'm just going to erase that so as not to confuse. The diagonal points are okay. It was my axes that I was off because I used the wrong points. So here we go from this axis here of that circle, and this one here, and where it hit on that outer circle there. So here we go. I'm going to reconnect. Bear with me. That to there. And it'll change the shape ever so slightly. So it's absolutely worth it to make that revision. Ah, that's just feeling so much better. And this point to here. And to here. This is feeling much more like an octagon. This is a sharper edge here. That one was okay. This one was not okay. All right, we're ready to go with the octagon.